Okay, after an extended summer vacation, we're in tough halacha test. Okay, halacha test. Hamagid koidim shahei. If you kasher on Erev Pesach before chametz becomes asur, yochel lahagid biyachad klirishon klisheni with kelim shabol davamud. You're allowed to kasher klirishon and a klisheni and kelim that have a small bli in them. There's nothing wrong. And the most fixing gam kain and magid kasasa klishni famim. It's also not a problem if you kasher the same one part of the kli two times. Meaning you kasher half the kli at a time, so there's a certain overlap, and one part of the kli gets kashered twice. That's also not a problem. Okay, so before I explain what's going on over here, I have to just say that the Mishnah Berurah points out that really the first halacha and Tafnun Beis is all about this and about 10 other things. It's a long halacha over there, and the Mishnah Berurah says nothing over here. Basically, he says go look over there and you'll see everything that there is. But I'm going to talk about one angle of it, which is negated to both, but we might as well do it here. Okay, this din over here about doing a klirishon, klisheni, comes from, it seems to be coming out of no place, and it comes from as follows. There's a major question, probably the prime question in Hag'alah's Kelim, the Taisus is kasha, which is, how could, when you kasha a kli, when you do Hag'alah, the blias come out of the kli into the water. So what in the world are you doing when you kasha? The blias go into the water, and the blias will turn around and go right back into the kli. So what's the point of doing Hag'alah's Kelim? You're going to take the bli out. If you do libun, you're going to burn the bli up. It's not going to come back. But if you draw the bli out of the wall, what stops the bli from just going right back in? Okay, that's probably the most basic question you have to know about Hag'alah's Kelim. And there's two main answers to that question. Okay, there's the two main answers that we follow are either you have to wait, you can't kasher until the kli is any b'yamri. So like this, when the bli comes out, it'll be lafgam into the water. That's one main answer. The other answer is that you have to kasher. There has to be enough water to be mevatel any bli is coming out. So let's say I'm kasher on the fork. The fork has only how much bli it can have, only as big as the fork is. I use so much water that the bli is coming out of the fork will be buckled into the water. So then the water's kosher. The water's kosher. It can't make the fork chafe again. Okay, those are the two main answers, which is what we hold of halacha.
This is where?
In Chulin. I think it's on Kufches. Okay, okay. Now there are many other answers to this kasha. We're trying to find many other answers.
Really? Any other?
Yes, there's 3 or 4 other answers. Okay, we're doing one today. Okay, Tafnun Beis Halach Aleph is all the other answers. Okay, that's what Tafnun Beis Halach Aleph is. This then is talking about one of the other answers, which is the other answer is that we have a rule in Malicha that while something is being pilot, it can't be belay. Things can only go in one direction at a time, in or out, but they can't go both directions at the same time. So Taisus says maybe the answer is that while the bli is going out of the kli, it can't go back in. While it's being sucked out of the kli, it goes out, and during that time it can't go back in. Which means is you could kasher a kli as soon as it became treif, but what you're going to have to do is when the kli stops giving out tam, you got to pull it right out of the Hag'alah water. You can stick it in. It's going to give out plita for 3 minutes. When those 3 minutes are up, you got to get it right out, because else it's going to start turning around and reabsorbing. So if you time your kashering just right, you're able to kasher. That's how you're able to kasher. Please make such a suggestion that's what it is. Okay, and as you know, it's in line with this truth Aruch I've said to you a bunch of times, which says that it's like a physical thing. You could watch the bleeds coming out. So you could watch the bleeds coming out, and when the bleeds are finished coming out, then the court says you would pull it out. And it really comes from a Gemara. The Gemara asks whether a certain kli is balei or not, and the Gemara says we see that it has bleeds coming out of it. And to them, bleeds were a reality that they saw. And so that says you leave it in the kli. When the bleeds finished coming out, then you would pull it out.
But you never witnessed that.
Okay.
No, you
we tried. Okay, we're going to get back to this point. I'm putting this in your head. Just hold it a second. We're going to come back to it. Okay. According to this answer, now we come back to our data. According to this answer, if I have a kli that's a klirishon and a klisheni, a fork that was a belay as a klisheni, and another fork and a spoon that was belay as a klirishon, I can't catch them at the same time. That's how the Rishonim say. I can't catch them at the same time because they can take a different amount of time for the plita to come out. In fact, let's say the klisheni will take 30 seconds for the bleed to come out, and the klirishon is going to take 2 minutes for the bleeds to come out. Well, how can I put them in together when they're going to be for different amounts of time? What's going to happen is...
I got the Kashering before.
I don't know why no one thought of that. I thought of it. I don't know why not. But if I stick them in together, one, after 30 seconds, the Kashering will be finished being pilot, and let's say 10 seconds later, it will start being Belaya. And then the Kashering is still going to be out at the time. So you can't...
Why did the Kashering finish quicker?
Because it has less clear to get out. There's less in there.
Is that the word of Kashering?
Or, however you want to describe it. You want to say
it's a weaker,
whatever you want to call it. However you want to talk about this mythical blia. It's smaller, it's less, not in as deeply, whatever you want to, words you want to use, take less to come out. Okay. So we're going to take 30 seconds for the Kashering to give out its time. It's going to take 2 minutes for the Kashering to give it its time. So during that time, the Kashering is going to start absorbing from the Kashering. So according to this pshat and Tosfos, you would not be allowed to kasher a kli sheni with a kli rishon and a kli sheni together. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, aside from what David said, that why don't you just pull it out earlier? I don't know. There's another thing. No one seems to say that you should be choshish that one has more blias than the other. Maybe this is what you mean. Maybe one kli rishon has this much blia, has 2 inches of blia, and this kli rishon has 3 inches of blia.
Two kli rishon are the same size.
Even two kli rishon, maybe one should have
only put one zayt of chad. You only put one zayt of chad, and you take another thing that has 10 kli rishon.
Right, correct. So I guess it's a learning more like you're saying, which is like how deeply in does it go, and that all kli rishons will give out all their blias at the same amount of time, regardless of how much blia they have to have absorbed. Okay, now.
Who says this? I did meet with who says it?
This is Tosfos.
Tosfos also says
yes.
The third answer in Tosfos.
I told you there's many answers, many possible answers to that. Tosfos brings these 3. Okay, but there are other Rishonim give other answers. We're going to get when Taflin Beis Aleph is all those other answers.
2 answers.
Okay, so now, we don't paskin like this answer. Okay, and that's what this din is telling us, that there's no restriction. You can do a kli rishon and a kli sheni at the same time, and there's 3 possible nafkaminas to this din. 3 things that this din would make you do. First of all, you wouldn't be allowed, according to Tosfos, you have to leave the kli in for just the right amount of time, and you can't leave it in extra. You can't leave it in too long, because or else it'll start reabsorbing. Second, you wouldn't be able to kasher different kelim at the same time, a kli rishon and a kli sheni. Mm-hmm. And third, is that you couldn't kasher a kli twice. But the Ramah says at the end, if I kasher a kli, if I take this board and I want to kasher, and I stuck it into the pot. So if I wanted to do first this half, and I'm going to turn it over and do the other half. Well, obviously there's going to be an overlap. You know what I'm saying? Instead of the first, I'm going to go till here. So in that overlap, I'm going to be kashering that part twice. So according to Tosfos, you couldn't do that, because once I kasher one part, if I stick it back into the water, it's going to be belaya from the other part from this part is being put on, this will be belaya. So we don't hold like all. Then that's what the Mechaber and the Ramah say, that you're allowed to kasher kli rishon and kli sheni together. You're allowed to kasher even the same part of a kli twice. It's all okay, because we don't hold like this Tosfos.
No, hold on. We have a way out of it.
Okay, so
even they would be not with what we do.
You think if you do kli tzeni ben yomer, so then you have no problem. Excuse me. I thought of that. I'm not sure what the answer is. That's not how we say it, because you should know. Okay, there's a different question. The Bir Halacha in Taflin Beis says, he says, why does the Mechaber say only if you magal koidim shahei, meaning only when chametz heter and this and that? If you be magal after shahei, it should be mutter also. Because we don't hold like this. These answers are Tosfos. Or as you're saying, because it's Ein Ben Yomer anyhow. Like we're going to wait till it's Ein Ben Yomer anyhow to kasher. And the Bir Halacha is not sure, but you do see from what he says that he's assuming we don't hold like this teretz at all.
What's that idea? What's the Kashrus? Ein Ben Yomer is still also.
Ein Ben Yomer, what do you mean still also? No. So that's what it means kodim shahei, because what the thing is like this, right? At shahei, chametz becomes aser, but you could still kasher until Pesach starts. On Chol Hamoed you're not allowed to, because chametz is aser b'mashu. Once Pesach starts, chametz is aser b'mashu. Because aser b'mashu you can't kasher. But if it's from shahei until Pesach comes, chametz is aser, but it's not b'mashu yet, so you could still kasher. You could still do Hag'alah kelim on Pesach, on Erev Pesach in the afternoon. You could still technically do it. Okay, so now all this we're talking about is if we don't hold on this teretz, but most people don't know that in Taflin Beis the Magen Avram says, and the Bir and the Mishabru brings it, that the minig is that if you kasher on Erev Pesach after shahei, meaning from shahei until Pesach starts, you should be machmir for the shita, and you should be machmir and do what this shita says, and that the blias might go out and come back in. Okay,
and do what?
that you should not, whatever it says in this din, I thought Taisa says that the blia goes out, and once it goes out, it could turn around and come back in.
Right.
Once it's finished going out, it can go back in. You should be machmir for that shita. You should be machmir for that shita. Okay, so now that's what the Magen Avraham says. He says you should be machmir on Erev Pesach for that shita. Now, let's think about it. There's three nafkaminas to the shita. One is you have to only leave it in for a certain amount of time. Okay, now that's impossible because we don't see anything. Now, you could say if the Magen Avraham saw it, or the Rashba saw it, or Taisha saw it, the blia is coming out, so he could say, I'm going to leave it in only for a certain amount of time. I'm going to try to be machmir for that shita. But we can't do that. If I start to focus, how long should I leave it in for? I don't see any blias. How am I going to leave it in for just around the amount of time? So it's not possible for us to be machmir in that way. So now I have a question. Do you think that us, sitting here in 2007, should be machmir for the other parts of this din? Meaning, another part of this thing was you can't do a kli rishon and a kli sheni together. Another part of it is you can't kasher a kli twice. You can't do part of a kli 2 times. So should we be machmir for that shita? The Magen Avraham says between shahei and the end of the day you should be machmir for that shita. Should I do that? Should I say don't kasher a kli rishon and a kli sheni together? I say well, the Magen Avraham says you should be machmir for it. Or should I say it's like silly? What am I going to do? I'm going to say only put 2 kli rishon by itself. Don't do 2 kli rishons together. And I'm going to do it. And I'm going to leave it in for 3 minutes. Well, maybe it only has, according to Shita, it can only be in for 2 minutes. What? Maybe how? It seems a little bit like being sorry for myself to say I'm going to be machmir for the Shita and not put the kli rishon with the kli sheni. But at the same time, I know that I'm not doing what that Shita says. The Shita says leave it in for just the right amount of time. I know I'm not doing that. I know I'm for sure not. I'm failing on that side because I have no way to judge that. So does it make sense that a person should be machmir and say, don't put a kli rishon and kli sheni, or don't do a kli, one part of a kli 2 times, when I know I'm wasting my time anyhow? Think about it. If I say, don't kasher this kli 2 times. Right, but he's saying, and even so you should be machmir to the shita. Even if it's ain't a binyan, you should still be machmir and not do a kli rishon and a kli sheni together. So I'm going to say this: don't put in the kli halfway like this and then halfway like that because there's going to be overlap.
Why should you be machmir when it's ain't a binyan?
I don't know. I don't understand that. But that was his question. I don't know what the answer to that is. What do you be machmir on if it's already ain't a binyan anyhow? But would there be a seichel to say don't do it half and half, but instead let's say it's sometimes the big pot, I stick the whole thing into the big pot. I'm going to leave it in just as long. I'm not going to be any smarter. I'm going to leave it in because I don't know what I'm doing. So, just a question. I don't think that anyone was machmir since Magen Avraham. It's not very common to kasher anyhow. On Erev Pesach, it's not such a common thing. I mean, it's mutter, but it's not such a common thing. But I've never heard of someone being machmir on this thing, and maybe because of this, because the shita that you're being machmir for, it's not something that we can do. We can do some of the official ways that you're supposed to be machmir on it, but everybody knows good and well that even if you're machmir on it, you will not be yotze what he says. You can't do what the Taisa says, even if you try, because you can't do it fully. Okay. Now, till now we're talking about if there's a maximum amount of time you should kasher. According to this Taisa, you can't kasher for longer than a certain amount of time. If you kasher for too long, then the blia starts coming back in. So you have to stop at a certain time. What about the opposite? Is there a minimum to how long you have to kasher?
We don't know. No one ever gives any time.
Okay, so that's what I just want to talk about that for a second.
Okay.
So in the din, it says there's no minimum. The blias go out immediately. It's like an instant thing. The blias go right out. Okay, that's how it talks about it. However, Belsky always says that it's hard to believe that I stick a kli in and I dunk it into the water, and in 1 second the blias are coming out. When it doesn't appear to us that the water even had a chance to affect the kli in the sense of the heat of it. We don't see that it had any effect, that it penetrated the kli by making it hot. So it's hard to believe that the blia, it did its job for getting out blias if you put it in for such a short amount of time. And he understands that when it says it's instant, that means it's instant, assuming that it's hot. If we don't even see the all that we see of Hag'alah is that the water penetrates the kli and makes it hot. If we didn't even see that, he doesn't think you did a Hag'alah. Okay?
Assuming the kli becomes hot.
He says, no, if the kli that you kasher didn't become hot, then you affect. Okay, if it became hot, you affected it. So you could say you did a Hag'alah, but to say that you just dunk it in the water for a fraction of a second, it's so in and out so quickly that it doesn't even get hot. He's hard to believe that that's true. And in fact, Shulchan says the same thing. He says in this din, he says you should kasher for a certain amount. I forgot the words that he uses. Just for a short amount of time. You shouldn't just do it instantly. Leave it a little bit to stay in there. Okay? He doesn't give a share. He doesn't tell you how much that little bit is. He doesn't say 10 seconds, or he doesn't give a share. And Rabbi Belsky's Hag'alah of it is that it's got to be an amount of time that the heat is penetrating the kli and it gets hot. Okay? So that means is if you're in, we talked about this once before, in a cast iron pot, and this huge, heavy, very thick metal. If you put it into the water, immediately the water cools down because it's so much metal. So what you would do is you would leave it there until the water reboiled. Okay, so then that's like a way of judging if the water already came back to a boil. It's already overcome the coldness of the kli and it's penetrated and used Hag'alah. In plants, usually this is not an issue because usually in a plant when you kasher, you're heating up the water in the kli that you're kashering. You have a big kettle and you fill it up with water and you bring it to a boil. So it gets hot together. The kli and the thing become hot together. And also industrial equipment is usually very thin. So you run into equipment, it's very easy to get it hot. It's not something that usually takes time. But of course, we talked about this also before. If you have something like a thick piston or you have a heavy piece of equipment that you dunk into a kettle, then you have to give it time to get hot. You can't kasher a kli. You can't kasher it just by running water through it for 10 seconds that the kli should walk out cold when you finish with it. Okay? We had other problems with that. We had another problem with that, is that if you run the water through so quickly, it doesn't turn into a kli rishon. That's a separate problem. Okay? Here I'm not talking about whether it became a kli rishon. I'm talking about just that if the heat didn't even penetrate it, it's hard to believe that you did a Hag'alah. Okay? And one last thing is, this halacha test, if you look at it just in the Shulchan Aruch, appears to be just at a place, just plopped in there, just in the middle of the place. And you could even make guesses that maybe it's connected to halacha hey and halacha vav, but really just from the order of it, just to explain to you the seder of what's going on over here, is that the Torah says a lot more about halacha test than the Shulchan Aruch does. What it says in the Torah is you have to kasher. Really, it's a continuation from halacha vav, which is really you have to kasher even. He says you have to kasher kli even if it has the tiniest amount of bliyah. That's what we saw. So even if it has a tiny amount of bliyah, you have to kasher it. For example, if you have a kli rishon and a kli sheni, you have to kasher it. And then he continues on. I'm skipping something. He says something else, and he continues on. He says, and even if it's a kli that you only have a chashash that chametz went into it, which is halacha yud. That's halacha yud. That even has only a chashash that has chametz into it, then you have to kasher it. And in the middle, the part that I skipped is, and he says, then he talks about this thing as well. What happens now that I told you have to kasher kalim even that have a tiny amount of bliyah? Can you kasher those kalim together with the kalim that have a lot of bliyah? He talks about this question. Now that I told you that those need kashering, what would you do if you have two kalim to kasher at the same time? And to that he says whatever he says. So the mechaber is just pulling out that middle part. Okay, he's pulling out that middle part that you understand that you have to kasher even if it has a small bliyah. And you're allowed to kasher them at the same time, a small bliyah and a large bliyah. And then halacha yud is a continuation of the Torah, really, which is, don't forget you have to kasher even kalim that have a small bliyah. That halacha yud is going to be something about that. Okay, thank you.